Welcome, curious minds. Today we're challenging a perception that shapes how many of us view a pivotal moment in American history. We often imagine the American Civil War was solely about states' rights or economic systems, a brutal clash of ideologies that exploded into violence. But what if one of the most powerful, often unseen forces tearing the nation apart and then attempting to reunite it was something far more spiritual, more deeply rooted in faith?
It's an aspect frequently overlooked, isn't it? The profound intertwining of American religious institutions and, well, that animating faith with the political landscape of that era. This exploration today will really pull back the curtain on that often hidden dimension, revealing just how crucial it was.
We're about to delve into a truly remarkable book, Righteous Strife, by Richard Carwardine. This work illuminates how deeply intertwined American religious institutions and faith were with the political landscape leading up to, during, and immediately after the Civil War. Our mission today is to explore how profoundly faith shaped this era, not just as a passive backdrop, but as an active, divisive, and eventually unifying force. By the end of our conversation, you'll gain a richer understanding of this pivotal period, seeing it through an entirely new lens.
And before we really dig into the material, we want to mention how this exploration connects with our Mindful Moments series over on our YouTube channel. There we offer AI book analysis designed to inspire reflection and, rational thought, helping you make sense of complex ideas, just like we're trying to do right now. It's about taking those explorations into insights that really matter.
Okay, so let's unpack this fascinating period. Let's start right at the foundation. The American founders and their own complex relationship with faith and the fledgling republic. We often talk about separation of church and state, but Carwardine's book shows the founders had incredibly diverse personal faiths. They were far from a monolithic group.
Oh, absolutely.
You think about Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, often seen as free thinkers, right alongside deeply orthodox evangelicals like John Jay and John Witherspoon. Then you have figures like George Washington, whose personal piety is often described as, well, elusive, or Alexander Hamilton with his kind of fluctuating Christian convictions. James Wilson leaned towards the Reformed tradition. John Adams started as a Trinitarian Congregationalist, but later embraced Unitarianism. And James Madison famously remained very private about his religious beliefs. It's quite a spectrum.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is how, despite these significant differences in personal faith, they largely converged on a shared conviction. They believed that the morality of reason essentially coincided with the morality of revelation. This belief was foundational to their vision for the new nation.
Interesting.
So the First Amendment's guarantee of the free exercise of religion, therefore, wasn't designed to usher in a radical secularization, not like the French revolutionaries would later pursue. Instead, it was fundamentally about protecting religious liberty. It established a framework where Christian values, and indeed many diverse faiths, still had ample civic space to thrive and influence public life, rather than being confined solely to the private sphere. That distinction is critical.
And it definitely wasn't a homogeneous Christian nation from the very start, was it?
Not at all.
The book paints a vivid picture of striking religious diversity, even within the early colonies. You found established Roman Catholic communities, various German Protestant groups like Lutherans, Mennonites, Moravians, along with French Huguenots, Dutch Reformers, and even Sephardic Jews, plus all the various Scottish and Scotch-Irish Protestant traditions, including unique groups like the Keithian Quakers. It was a real mosaic.
Absolutely. And this religious pluralism expanded even further during the 1780s and 1790s. We see the emergence of Universalists and Unitarians alongside distinctive communal groups like the Shakers. But perhaps most significantly for the future trajectory of the nation, there was a major expansion of New Light Baptists and Methodists.
Okay, the New Light Baptists.
Yeah, those who embraced the emotional, experiential side of the Great Awakening, emphasizing personal conversion and religious revival over, strict adherence to established creeds. This burgeoning religious diversity, while a testament to the new nation's commitment to freedom, held within it both the potential for national integration, a shared sense of religious liberty binding people together, but also, as we'll soon discover, the very seeds for profound division down the line. It was a complex, multifaceted religious landscape inherently ripe for both unity and conflict.
Right. And here's where the narrative really picks up, I think. Despite this growing diversity, there was this powerful, almost instinctive movement to sacralize the new republic. Patriot clergy, especially Presbyterians and New England Congregationalists, interpreted the revolution itself as irrefutable evidence of God's favor.
They saw it as providence in action.
Exactly. They saw the forging of intercolonial unity, the emergence of George Washington as this, providential leader, and the improbable defeat of a mighty foe as direct signs. They believed the same God who had guided their Puritan forebears was now lavishing his favor on this new nation. Through a torrent of Thanksgiving, fast day, and election sermons, they diligently connected these dots, weaving a divine narrative around America's very birth.
It's an important question, though. How did they actually do this? The book highlights the pervasive Exodus narrative, drawing parallels between Moses leading Israel from Pharaoh's oppression and America's liberation. This narrative offered potent lessons of divine judgment, providential victory, and a clear divine purpose for the new nation.
Powerful imagery.
Very. One Connecticut pastor, upon the return of peace, emphatically declared that the Lord hath been on our side, hath fought our battles, and delivered us from the hands of our enemies. He challenged his congregation, asking if the wonders done for the land could possibly be ascribed to fortuitous hits and accidents. His resounding no affirmed them as effects and productions of the wise and steady counsels of heaven. This wasn't just rhetoric. It profoundly shaped a belief that America was not merely a nation, but God's model for the world, designed to prepare the way for the promised land of the latter days, as a Philadelphia Presbyterian put it.
So what's the core insight we should take from this early period? This fusion of piety and patriotism was incredibly strong, yet the book reminds us that the nation in 1776 was, well, a fragile republic.
Right. Fragile is the key word.
Its unity was often more a pragmatic response to external threats than a deep, internalized attachment to a unified American identity. Fierce localism, regional and ethnic interests, conflicts between the backcountry and the eastern seaboard. These continued to impose significant limits on how far inhabitants truly considered themselves American.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, historian John Murren offered a really apt description. The constitutional arrangements provided a roof without walls for a fragmented political community. Its national identity was an unexpected, impromptu, artificial, and extremely fragile creation of the revolution.
A roof without walls. I like that.
Yeah. Yet, despite this inherent fragility, Republican language and reasoning, deeply steeped in Christian ideals, saturated the discourse of American Protestants for generations. They sacralized the Constitution itself, intertwining themes like the role of Christian republics in thwarting despotism, their reliance on charity, and the pursuit of liberty and equality for the common good. The idea of republicanism as God-given, scriptural, virtuous, it was ubiquitous in evangelical sermons and writings. It helped imbue the new governmental structure with sacred meaning, even given its inherent weaknesses.
Okay, so moving beyond that initial fragile unity, the new nation quickly became marked by what the book calls divisive sectarianism. Christian pluralism meant not just variety, but contending ambitions and sharp doctrinal differences, often refracted through lenses of region, class, race, ethnicity.
These fault lines.
Exactly. Orthodox Christians found themselves locked in battles against Unitarianism, deism, and the Enlightenment skepticism fueled by works like Tom Paine's Age of Reason. But even among themselves, they were deeply fractured. You had predestinarian and biblicist Calvinists, for instance, contending fiercely with equally conversionist but staunchly Arminian Methodists, and with Anglican-style moralists who, denying the need for conversion, stressed the duty of an ethical life. Lots of internal conflict.
And this period also saw Congregationalist clergy in New England who had enjoyed a standing order, meaning their church was formally established, often state-supported, clinging to their authority. They were trying to fashion the nation's future in their own image. Meanwhile, Baptists, Methodists, and Quakers battled vigorously against this coercive monopoly.
Pushing back.
Vigorously. Even within their own denominations, they were embroiled in doctrinal and evangelistic confrontations. Episcopalians openly rebuked Quakers for their social radicalism and Methodists and Baptists for what they saw as an assault on Anglican authority. The book details how contrasting conservative and radical millennialist views in the 1780s and 1790s, different interpretations of Christ's thousand-year reign on earth, vied for the nation's future. This laid crucial groundwork for profound future conflict. It shows how deeply internal religious disagreements were shaping the very identity of the nation.
At the same time, a different cultural fault line was forming, particularly among the waves of migrants streaming over the Appalachians, a staggering 2 million and more by 1820.
A huge migration.
Huge. This migration fueled the rise of the upstart churches, especially Methodist and Baptist revivalists.
Yeah.
They were incredibly versatile and nimble, proving adroit and competitive. They were the fastest to reach the moving line of isolated frontier settlements in places like Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. These ambitious yet largely uneducated religious enthusiasts outpaced the agents of government and the educated ministry of less agile Eastern churches,
Oh.
delivering a plain gospel to settlers, many rooted in the pre-revolutionary South's backcountry culture.
And this great expansion of evangelical forces essentially amounted to a rebellion against older Calvinist authority. It appealed directly to a democratic sovereign audience on the frontier people who warmed to emotional preaching that honored equality, liberation, and the dispersal of power away from centralized hierarchies.
So much more democratic in spirit.
Very much so. Baptists, in particular, became the quintessential democratizers of American Christianity. They were anti-elitist, self-confident religious enthusiasts. Their inspirational figure, John Leland, a leading New Light Baptist in Virginia, fought passionately for religious freedom, exalting the individual conscience over creedal systems, local control over powerful ecclesiastical structures, and popular sensibility over the instincts of the educated and powerful. This fundamental shift was crucial in shaping a distinct American religious landscape, one often at odds with older, more hierarchical forms of Christianity, and it really laid the groundwork for future political divisions.
Now, this brings us to a truly crucial turning point, and one that highlights how faith, unfortunately, could be twisted to justify terrible evils: slavery. The book shows that early in the century, Christians, both North and South, generally understood slavery as a necessary evil that they expected would gradually die out. A Charleston Presbyterian, for instance, even described it as at least injudicious as far as the happiness of the master was concerned. There was a widespread, if often passive, acceptance that it would eventually fade.
Yet what's profoundly unsettling here is the rapid and dramatic shift that occurred. With the slave population doubling and then tripling, and the cotton economy booming, white evangelicals in the slave states painstakingly constructed a pro-slavery consensus by mid-century. Slavery was no longer seen as an evil or a transient institution. Instead, it was reinterpreted as a positive good.
A positive good.
Yes. This new ideology fused evangelical piety with Southern ideas of honor, producing a distinctly manly reforming evangelicalism, quite different from what was developing in the North. It also merged with a form of republicanism that was far more deferential and class-stratified than the more egalitarian version up north. Iverson L. Brooks, a Baptist minister who had once spoken out against slavery as a moral wrong, remarkably became convinced during the 1840s that it was God's institution. He argued that slavery sustained Republican peace and safety by uniting labor and capital, cultivating the mutual good feeling of master and servant, and crucially preventing the strife he believed was inherent in a free labor system. This profound reinterpretation of faith was absolutely essential in solidifying the South's unwavering commitment to slavery, setting the stage for national rupture.
Building on these diverging religious landscapes, we then see how they directly translated into the burgeoning political parties of the mid-19th century. Carwardine's book makes it clear the Whig Party became the natural home for a particular brand of religious nationalism. This party attracted moral, social, and economic self-improvers who championed moral reform through legislation. They were, in essence, the party for those who believed in using government as a tool to improve society, top down.
Right. And if we connect this to the broader political trends, the Whigs fundamentally saw their role as using government to actively cultivate virtue within society. They were explicitly recognized as the political arm of the benevolent empire organizations, that network of voluntary societies dedicated to social and moral reform, like temperance movements. They actively pushed for societal improvements through legal means, embodying a vision of collective moral uplift through state action. This approach stood in sharp contrast to their political rivals,
who were the Democrats. By contrast, the Democrats, inheriting from Jefferson and the earlier Democratic Republicans, held a profound antipathy to any form of political support for religion. Their core philosophy was that the government's primary role was to protect its citizens from religious tyranny, not to facilitate concerted action between priests and politicians. This aligned perfectly with their laissez-faire beliefs and a general distrust of government intrusion into individual lives. They saw it as a threat to personal liberty.
So who did this appeal to, and why did it become such a defining difference? The book reveals Democrats attracted those who feared the perceived authoritarianism of church and state Whigs. They also drew support from lower-class rural folk in the South and West who were hostile to Yankee missions and alienated by Whiggery's often elitist reputation. Crucially, it appealed to self-conscious Democratic Christians who championed equality and desired a government that pursued the permanent good of the whole without interfering in personal piety. These individuals fiercely resisted Sabbatarian enactments laws enforcing Sunday observance, seeing them as a dangerous return to Puritan blue laws that would cleave asunder America's delicate structure of civil liberty and empower ecclesiastical autocrats.
So cries of priestcraft were common.
Oh yes, common against temperance advocates who sought to enforce sobriety by law, seen as an infringement on personal freedom. The Democrats' defense of religious minorities and dissenters also made them a natural home for deists and free thinkers, which, perhaps predictably, led Whigs to shamelessly paint their opponents as the party of atheists, blasphemers, and most of the moral dregs and pollution of the land, while simultaneously burnishing their own credentials as the Christian party. This ideological chasm was widening significantly.
Which brings us directly to the eve of the Civil War. The book describes the Republican Party's emergence as this powerful fusion movement of anti-slavery Protestants. This new political force coalesced around a compelling platform: free soil, free speech, free labor, free men. The dynamic fusion was the chrysalis of the party that would triumph in 1860, fundamentally reshaping the American political landscape and setting the nation on an irreversible course.
It's quite remarkable how Lincoln, despite his own initial vexation over the nomination of a former Democrat, John C. Fremont, as vice presidential candidate, ultimately became the chief political beneficiary of this potent form of religious nationalism. His victory was widely judged, particularly by his supporters, as the redeeming triumph of the Lord's side. Yeah. Enough Northern Protestants stood as Republican candidates, acted as local organizers, delivered impassioned pulpit speeches, and marched with energetic groups like the Wide Awakes, those young Republican political clubs known for their torchlight parades, to warrant their claim of exerting a most controlling power in electing Mr. Lincoln. Many of them truly saw themselves as the Christian party in politics in electing him, believing his victory was a divinely ordained step towards national purification.
But this surge of religious nationalism for Lincoln wasn't without fierce opposition, right?
Not at all. Fierce is the word.
The book details the incredibly vociferous Democratic backlash. They denounced church and state men and pulpit screechers as the most dangerous class to the peace of society. This wasn't mere rhetoric. Philadelphia Democrats, for instance, launched a campaign paper explicitly called Political Priestcraft Exposed. We even hear of banners in New York depicting a minister wielding a rifle and revolver while trampling on a Bible, with the provocative caption, "Beecher's command kill each other with Shark's rifles," a direct jab at Henry Ward Beecher.
That imagery truly underlines the intensity, doesn't it? This raises an important question about how these perceptions were constructed. Democrats branded Republicans as tyrannical and unconstitutional. Southern Democrats, playing on the trauma of John Brown's plot at Harper's Ferry and viscerally alarmed by the existential threat to their way of life and their massive investment in human property, wielded the Bible and the Constitution as their own sacred texts.
A counter-narrative.
Exactly. They, along with many Northern Democrats, scoffed at the notion that God's law prohibited slavery. Instead, they pointed to America's blessings under the Constitution, asking, what nation on the globe has been so wonderfully and bountifully blessed as this people under our Constitution? They used that as powerful evidence of divine approval for their way of life, including slavery.
What's truly fascinating here is Lincoln's own evolving stance on religion and public pronouncements. His pre-presidential nationalism was essentially secular, marked by this pervasive optimism and a rich sense of America as an exemplar of Republican liberty. He saw the country as an outlet for free white people everywhere, in which Hans and Baptiste and Patrick may find new homes and better their conditions in life. He openly scorned anti-Catholicism and supported the right of any people to rise up and shake off the existing government. He seemed focused squarely on human ambition and opportunity.
Yet, as president, especially during the unprecedented national crisis of the Civil War, Lincoln began to invoke God and providence far more frequently in his public addresses. The book suggests this could have been a political calculation, a strategic adaptation to the needs of a largely Christian public hungry for reassurance.
A shrewd move, perhaps.
Could be. His emphatic rhetorical embrace of providence, therefore, could be seen that way. However, without a true window into a man's soul, it's hard to say definitively. Those who study Lincoln are commonly struck by his intellectual integrity and rigor. He didn't usually take a new position he couldn't, in conscience, defend. So while his providentialism might have been for public consumption, it could equally have grown from an acute, personal sense that the emergency would test him to his human limits, and possibly beyond. The book implies there need have been no shame in seeking and finding strength from a superintending higher power in such dire circumstances. The shift is unmistakable, though, and its sincerity remains a compelling question.
Let's turn to a pivotal moment just before the outbreak of war. The book uses President Buchanan's National Fast Day in January 1861 as a fascinating lens into the nation's trauma, right as secession was gaining unstoppable momentum. Pulpits across the country delivered three broad, diverging perspectives. First, the unyielding anti-slavery nationalists, mainly up north, sympathetic to the Republicans. Second, in the southern pulpits, pro-slavery ministers resolved to resist what they called unscriptural Republican madness and the perceived assault on constitutional values. And third, the broadest group urged compromise, arguing that slavery, whatever its moral dimensions, must not be allowed to sunder God's chosen nation.
What's particularly telling here is the strong reaction against Buchanan himself. Many saw his call for prayer not as strength, but as glaring weakness, even hypocrisy. A damning report on deep-seated corruption within his administration had utterly eroded Old Buck's moral authority.
Faith without works is dead.
Exactly. That was the cry from many. A Tennessee Whig sneered the fasting day was unnecessary, had the obese old pub funk, not fed on the spoils of office. At New York's Broadway Tabernacle, Joseph Parrish Thompson laid out a furious charge sheet, accusing Buchanan of the Austin Manifesto, conniving in Dred Scott, championing the Lecompton Constitution. They believed you couldn't just pray when you should be acting decisively. We have no right to ask God to do our duty, was a common sentiment. There was even sarcastic criticism of the fasting itself.
So Lincoln enters office amidst this chaos, facing immense pressure, particularly regarding emancipation. The book reveals how anti-slavery nationalists scolded him for his caution, especially after he modified General Fremont's Emancipation Proclamation in Missouri in August '61. Fremont's order threatened to free the slaves of rebels.
But Lincoln, in a spirit of caution, asked him to reframe it to align only with the Confiscation Act. He feared a sweeping proclamation would destabilize crucial border states like Kentucky. When Fremont indignantly refused to retract privately, Lincoln very cheerfully ordered a public retraction. This was seen by some as executive cowardice.
So how did Lincoln navigate these incredibly complex waters while trying to maintain broad support?
Well, the book shows he was consistently seen by many as a leader of unimpeachable personal integrity and unquestioned patriotism. A man of moderation and self-control, deeply conscientious about the Constitution and law. His supporters believed that, under Providence's divine guidance, the logic of events would gradually build public support for emancipation. He also allowed commanders to exclude fugitive slaves from military lines, which further testified that the Army's sole purpose was seen, at least initially, as crushing rebellion, not primarily ending slavery. This approach, while frustrating for radicals, allowed him to maintain a broader base of support, buying him time.
Then, in September 1862, just weeks before the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, that delegation from Chicago presented Lincoln with a memorial demanding national emancipation. Their premise was the interrelationship of rulers, government, and God's providence. They argued God acted with exterminating thunder to punish slavery, just as Jefferson warned.
A powerful argument.
They declared deliverance wouldn't come till slavery ceases in the land. They pointed out the war was daily more destructive despite Union superiority and time was running out. They invoked God's command to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." They insisted measures taken so far were inadequate. The president, as head of a Christian nation, must use his war powers to proclaim national emancipation. Action driven by mere expediency lacked moral power, they argued.
And Lincoln's response is truly fascinating. He acknowledged the issue was on his mind by day and night more than any other. He openly worried that a proclamation issued on the heels of defeat would be seen as despair, implying it would come better, if at all, immediately after a victory. Then he uttered the pivotal words, "Whatever shall appear to be God's will, I will do." The delegates, after comparing impressions, left convinced his detailed objections indicated they had lost to his mind most of the force which they might once have had. They felt he was deeply earnest in his scrutiny of divine providence and departed, expecting a proclamation would follow a significant battlefield victory. It shows him wrestling with both profound moral and strategic considerations.
So what's a lasting insight here for understanding Lincoln's leadership? The book highlights a striking outcome of his caution. Contending religious nationalists across the spectrum read his messages and actions as evidence of his essential sympathy with their own profoundly different convictions.
Exactly. It was almost a Rorschach test. What anti-slavery nationalists interpreted as clear emancipationist signals took on a wholly different meaning for many religious conservatives. These conservatives saw an independent president untethered from his party's more radical elements and actively resisting them. For them, Lincoln modifying Fremont's proclamation had been strictly constitutional and eminently wise.
They applauded it.
They did. They also praised him for removing Secretary of War Simon Cameron after Cameron's proposal to arm the enslaved, a bloody-minded idea to them. His continued support for colonization of freed slaves revealed to them a commitment to gradual, not radical, reform, and allowing commanders to exclude fugitives testified the Army's sole purpose was crushing rebellion, not ending slavery. In their view, Lincoln was a pragmatic, constitutional leader resisting radical pressures, not embracing them. It speaks volumes about interpretive flexibility.
Now, the book also gives us a powerful glimpse into the soldiers' changing perspectives during the war. It offers a window into how American faith evolved in that crucible. At the start, Union volunteers reflecting their home communities included some sincere abolitionists, sure, but most signed up simply to restore the Union as it was. But over time, their brutal experience of combat, their firsthand encounters with the shocking realities of Southern slavery, and interactions with black regiments, well, it tempered their initial resolve into a more ambitious, determined anti-slavery nationalism.
Absolutely. This providentialist Christian faith truly permeated the armies. The notion that God took an active guiding role was pervasive, just like on the home front. Soldiers routinely prayed before battle to a superintending God, seeing him as their friend and protector, even amidst terrible slaughter. An infantryman affirmed God does nothing but what is right. A cavalry sergeant, asked by his wife how slavery looked to the naked eye, gave a disturbing account from Alabama, finding it many times worse than I ever imagined.
Seeing it firsthand changed things.
Dramatically. He was shocked to see pregnant women at the hardest work with only an excuse for a shirt and short petticoat on, and another tending acres of corn while nursing an infant born after she started breaking the ground. These direct, visceral experiences fundamentally changed many soldiers. They came to hate the Negro's master worse, as they witnessed the moral degradation firsthand. This deeply fueled their commitment, pushing them beyond just restoring the Union.
While Unionists increasingly saw God's hand guiding Lincoln, he faced intense, often grotesque vilification from Copperheads, those Northern Democrats who vehemently opposed the war. The book describes stunning illustrations portraying Lincoln as a diabolical agent. In one etching, writing the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's at a table whose legs morph into satanic cloven feet.
Just grotesque imagery.
With African heads featuring ram's horns at the corners. His pen dips into an inkwell held by a devil. On the wall, a satirical portrait of St. Osawatomie, John Brown, and a picture of the massacres of Santo Domingo, linking emancipation with violence. The back of Lincoln's chair is carved as an ass's head. A baboon-headed statue looks down, offering the guerrilla emancipator courage for his constitution-trampling fanaticism. Other rants called him an infernal, a fiend with a face like a demon, cunning, obscene, treacherous, lying, and devilish, or even the abolition Mephistopheles. Shocking stuff.
Astonishing. And it makes you ask, what fueled this intense vilification? The book reveals Copperheads like Clement Vallandigham and James McMaster, that fiery Catholic editor, vehemently opposed the war. They saw it primarily as an abolition crusade, destroying the Union solely to free black people. They viewed Lincoln as a tyrant restricting free speech, shutting down newspapers, suspending habeas corpus.
Arguing he put black liberty above white liberty?
Precisely. McMaster used his paper to attack all facets of social radicalism, adamant that constitutional protection of free speech extended even to his own vitriolic attacks on the president.
The book further details how Copperheads also accused the Lincoln administration of rampant corruption. They claimed officials were profiteering from war contracts. New England, for example, favored the war because it lost a Southern customer, but found a profitable substitute in Army contracts. They even accused military chaplains of confiscating Southern civilians' treasures, silks, china, gold, silver, and sending them home. One extreme claim asserted that since Babylon, no such corruption ever scandalized any city or country as the contractors, spies, thieves, office hunters, and speculators in Washington. A broad indictment designed to undermine trust.
This narrative played directly into their larger argument about Lincoln's perceived autocratic turn and a feared reign of terror. The core of their ideology, as the book explains, was a belief that local patterns of order and authority were divinely imposed constructs to be reverenced as expressions of God's will. Therefore, any threats to localism, like federal conscription or interference with state rights, were seen as direct threats to sacred order.
So the draft was seen as undermining God's order?
To them, yes. They viewed the Conscription Act, the first national draft, as the most deadly blow at the liberties of the people, overriding state sovereignty. McMaster famously challenged white men in a deeply racially charged call to ink yourselves all over and get up in the shambles and ask someone to buy you if they wouldn't fight for their inherited rights. It shows how intertwined their religious conservatism was with localism and explicitly white supremacy.
So given this constant barrage, how did Lincoln actually deal with it? It must have been wearing. The book describes his surprising admiration for Petroleum v. Nasby, that fictional Copperhead pastor created by satirist David Ross Locke. Nasby preached an anti-black, pro-slavery gospel of peace. Lincoln didn't just dismiss this. He used the satire as therapy, a vent for his gloom, but also recognized it as a powerful weapon to influence public opinion.
What's truly striking here is how Lincoln, a man who, quote, despised the unjust pro-slavery philosophy of Copperhead democracy, recognized a moral soulmate in the satirist Locke. Lincoln believed Locke's unique achievement lay in the powerful satirical weapon he fashioned to revile Copperheadism. He profoundly believed that Locke's written words, much like his own carefully crafted letters and speeches, had the capacity to change public opinion for the better. He saw it as a way to crystallize support among the ambivalent and strengthen the already supportive, even if it couldn't convert the resolute opposition. It shows Lincoln's keen understanding of public discourse, using unconventional means to engage hearts and minds.
As the tide of the war turned, especially after Atlanta fell, the book describes Unionists' nervousness transforming into this vibrant Christian confidence. Lincoln himself moved swiftly, proclaiming a national day of thanksgiving and prayer in September 64, acknowledging the supreme being in whose hands are the destinies of nations. His second inaugural address, delivered in March 1865, just weeks before his death, is presented as the most truthful, humble, and Christian ever delivered, a sacred swan song.
It was truly a masterpiece, and why was it so powerful? The book shows it was seen as matchless, encompassing the whole brutal contest without a word of boast or of pretended prophecy, in language the people of the United States, as a Christian nation, will welcome. Its profound depth seemed inversely proportionate to its brevity. Many interpreted it as Lincoln, a chosen instrument of God, humbly accepting God's will and the immense cost of national purification through war, leading his people like Moses.
Like Moses descending the mount.
Exactly. One observer noted his face shone like that of Moses when he descended from the mount, suggesting he followed the same sacrificial path as Christ. It became a defining moment of spiritual reconciliation for many.
Yet while Unionists saw divine purpose, the book reminds us that Confederate preachers who had long professed God is with us fell into anguished soul-searching as military failures mounted. Their initial confidence began to fray significantly.
Oh, profoundly. As Senator Robert M.T. Hunter remarked to Mary Chesnut, "The parsons tell us every Sunday that the Lord is on our side. I wish, however, he would show his preference for us a little more plainly." The Richmond Examiner lost all patience with fast days. Its editor argued Jefferson Davis's proclamations showed mental weakness, not muscular manhood, asking, "When the ship springs a leak, the efficient captain does not order all hands to prayers, but to the pumps."
Prayers versus pumps.
Right. Meanwhile, conservative religious nationalists in the North, much like the Copperheads, continued to denounce Lincoln's inaugural as a daring mockery, seeing its glittering generalities as a mask for butchery that would lead to total extermination. They still viewed Lincoln as a perjured usurper. The divisions persisted.
Then the assassination. A cataclysm. Yet, the book describes profoundly different interpretations. For many Unionists, it was seen as the almost divine completion of Lincoln's great work. God sent him to save the Union and destroy slavery. His mission was complete. He'd gone to his reward.
Like Moses, mission accomplished.
Exactly. A New Haven speaker told a vast gathering, "Mourn not for Lincoln. He has fought the good fight, kept the faith, finished his course. Henceforth there is laid up for him a crown of glory. His soul would ennoble the cleansed nation."
What's absolutely fascinating, though, is the Copperhead reaction. After years of demonizing him as a tyrant, they engaged in a stunning reversal. Leaders like Chauncey Burr, John Mullally, and James McMaster earnestly agreed the assassination removed a magnanimous leader. McMaster, shocked, even speculated some Puritan exterminationist must have done it, ironically blaming radical abolitionists.
A complete turnaround.
Completely. They suddenly believed Lincoln's disposition to conciliate his former enemies without utter degradation had given hope. They feared his death removed a leader uniquely able to fashion a just peace, worrying the vile New England faction, the radical Republicans, would now pursue confiscation and extermination, something Lincoln surely would have rejected. His death, for them, ironically became a catalyst for profound fear about the radical future of Reconstruction, underscores how deep these interpretations ran.
So what does this all mean for the future of American faith and politics, even after the war? The book shows that efforts for Presbyterian church reunion struggled precisely because Southern pro-slavery religion remained incredibly strong. Their continued plain reading of a Bible they believed sanctioned slavery created a faith that explicitly legitimized their church's antipathy to black equality and to what they termed political religion, often meaning abolitionism. The theological divide remained a chasm.
And this illustrates the enduring legacy of these powerful religious forces. The war resolved some issues, but certainly not all. Even into the 1870s, the new liberal Republican Party reflected ongoing alarm over centralizing federal power and a strong desire for moral suasion over President Grant's more forceful Reconstruction policies. This new party, supported by some former abolitionists and evangelicals, believed Grant's approach had failed and that moral suasion should prevail, not military or legislative coercion. This clearly demonstrates that the profound religious divides of the Civil War era, particularly those rooted in interpretations of slavery and racial equality, continued to shape the nation's political and moral landscape for decades. It's a powerful reminder that spiritual conflicts can linger far longer than military ones.
So you've now seen how deeply the very fabric of American faith, its initial pluralism, its moral outrage, its fervent nationalisms, and its profound, bitter divisions over slavery shaped one of the most tumultuous periods in our history. Understand the interplay of these forces gives you an incredible lens through which to view the past and perhaps even the present.
Absolutely. This book reveals how both sides of this cataclysmic conflict believed God was on their side, interpreting providence through their own distinct, often irreconcilable lenses. It wasn't just a political or military struggle, it was deeply spiritual. So what does it truly mean for a nation when its people interpret divine will so differently, leading to such profound division and war? And how does this ongoing interplay of faith and politics continue to shape us today, influencing our public discourse and our understanding of national purpose? It's a question worth continually considering.
If this exploration has sparked your curiosity and desire to learn more, you can discover even more incredible insights and deepen your understanding of complex subjects like this on our Mindful Moments YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more conversations like this, share with others who love to learn, and check out Righteous Strife by Richard Carwardine. The link to purchase your own copy and delve even further into this fascinating history is in the description. And as always, keep thinking critically.